Salutations, curious traveler of the internet. Are you watching me from a cozy countryside cabin or the heart of a skyscraper jungle? Tell me in the comments, and give this video some love by sharing it with your favorite people. Onward we go. My daughter came to visit me today. The meeting was strained, and neither of us left feeling any lighter. From the way her expression tightened as she walked out, I knew she hadn't found what she was searching for. She approached me with kindness, gentle words, a forced smile, even warmth, but time and distance had already built a wall between us. Too much had been left unsaid for too long, and the wounds we both carried ran deeper than politeness could cover. She spoke her piece, hoping to bring me back into her life. I couldn't give her that, not yet. All I told her was that I would consider it. And once she was gone, I crumbled and cried like a man lost. Marissa is grown now, married, raising children of her own. But in my memory, she's still the little girl who used to curl up in my lap at 3 years old, her head tucked beneath my chin. She's sharp, radiant, compassionate, everything her sister tells me she's become. And I believe it. In her, I see Claire's reflection. Even the stubbornness that flashes in her eyes belongs to her mother. She is everything a father could hope for in a daughter. So why have 5 silent years stretched between us? Why haven't I spoken a word to her? The answer begins with what happened to her mother. I can recall, with cruel clarity, the last words I hurled at Marissa. It was at her mother's funeral, 5 years ago, the worst day of my life. Standing at the edge of the grave, I turned to my eldest daughter and, fueled by grief and fury, told her she was as dead to me as the woman we had just buried. Then I spun toward my son, Simon, leveled a finger at him, and condemned him to the same fate. My eyes swept over the crowd of family and friends, my silence making it clear I meant them too. Their stunned faces, the way their eyes hardened in disbelief and anger. Those images will follow me to my grave. This is the weight I bear. Mourning my wife, lamenting the wreckage I caused, despising the man I became in the aftermath. That day, I walked away from everything, everyone, except my youngest daughter, Flora, whose small hand I clung to like a lifeline. Claire and I had fallen in love quickly, almost recklessly. From the start, it felt inevitable, as if we'd been waiting our whole lives for each other. We didn't just love one another, we loved the act of being in love. People used to joke that we were like apple pie and vanilla ice cream, each good alone, but extraordinary together. Even before we married, we already looked like we belonged side by side. That was back in high school. We married after college and eventually celebrated our 25th anniversary. But soon after that milestone, everything unraveled in ways I still struggle to understand. Our anniversary celebration had been perfect. A warm June day, clear skies, a massive white tent filled with laughter and music. Friends and family surrounded us. My father sat in his wheelchair at the head table beside Claire's parents and our 3 children. Neighbors, old classmates, even distant relatives showed up, their well wishes spilling over into gifts and hugs. At one point, the mayor himself arrived, presenting us with a plaque that declared June 14th, Claire and Matthew Jordan Day. 200 people danced and toasted beneath strings of lights, reliving decades of memories. When we renewed our vows, I don't think there was a dry eye in sight. Certainly not mine, and not Claire's either. In that moment, I couldn't see anyone else, our children standing proudly beside us, our family clasping hands in the front row, even Bo, our golden retriever, dozing at the preacher's feet. All faded away. All I saw was her, the woman who had completed me from the very beginning, the woman I intended to love for the rest of my life. Marissa had just returned from her honeymoon then, glowing from her own new marriage. Simon had finished his 2nd year of college, and Flora had wrapped up her 1st. For a few fleeting weeks, the house was full again, voices in every room, doors slamming, laughter spilling down the hallway. I never said it aloud, but I missed that chaos. I think Claire did too. For a moment, everything felt whole again. A few days after the party, I was returning the rented tables and chairs. Pulling back into the driveway afterward, I cut the corner too tightly and clipped the headlight of a brand new Lexus. The officer who came to take the report was Gavin, a boy I'd watched grow up alongside Simon. He wasn't a boy anymore. He stood taller than me, broad-shouldered in his uniform, a man now. I felt a quiet pride seeing what he'd become, almost as if he were my own. Once the paperwork was finished, we lingered, catching up about nothing in particular. When he finally turned to leave, he shook my hand and said, "Good seeing you again, Mr. Jordan. Sorry I missed the anniversary. My folks told me it was one for the books." I shook his hand, remembering him as the scrawny kid who always slid too late into second base. He smiled as he added, "Oh, and tell Mrs. Jordan to watch herself at stop signs. Next time I might have to do more than let her off with a warning." The remark caught me off guard. Confusion must have shown on my face. "Damn," he muttered, realizing his mistake. "Forget I said that." I tried to ease his embarrassment, even as the words he'd spoken turned over in my head. "It's all right," I said lightly. "Claire doesn't always mention when she gets a ticket. Thinks I'll ground her from driving if I find out." I gave a short laugh. I wouldn't, of course, but I let her think it. So, what was this one for? I might tease her about it at dinner. He hesitated. "Shouldn't have brought it up," he muttered. "Forget it. Don't want to get anyone in trouble." It wasn't anything serious. I let my grin stretch a little wider, aiming for a tone that felt easygoing, even teasing. "No, nothing bad. No one's in trouble. Just some harmless ribbing, really. What happened?" "A couple weeks ago, Saturday the 31st, if my memory's right, your wife was leaving the Holiday Inn parking lot and pulled out onto Highway 40. There's a stop sign there, but she didn't bother slowing down. Didn't hit anybody, didn't even cause a scare, but she came out fast enough that I had to pull her over and remind her to slow it down. I wrote her up for running the sign, but honestly, there wasn't any danger. I let her off with just a warning." "Gavin, seriously, it's no big deal," I said, still smiling. "You handled it perfectly. I'll make sure to remind her, might even tease her a bit about it. Appreciate you telling me. Good to see you again." After we finished unloading the tables and chairs, I stayed behind in the truck, replaying Gavin's story in my head. The 31st? That was 2 weeks back. I'd spent that entire weekend at Dad's place, helping him with chores he couldn't manage anymore. Marissa's wedding had been just before that, and I was still trying to wrap my head around it. That Saturday, I'd even taken Dad to check out an assisted living home, not because I thought he'd say yes, but because I needed him to see his options. Predictably, he wanted nothing to do with it. I'd spent the whole day with him, drove home late Sunday night, and walked in around 9. Claire hadn't mentioned anything unusual. No ticket, no warning. She just said she'd spent the afternoon reading quietly. She'd never lied to me, or so I believed back then, so I figured Gavin must have been mistaken. I wrote it off as one of those strange misunderstandings that never quite make sense. About a month after the anniversary party, my sister called. On her regular visit, she'd found Dad sprawled on the kitchen floor. He'd fallen earlier that morning and couldn't get himself back into his wheelchair. He wasn't hurt, just shaken and confused. I arranged to visit that weekend, hoping the scare might finally convince him to consider downsizing, maybe even moving somewhere with help close by. But knowing him, I doubted he'd budge. He was stubborn to the core, with a streak of mischief that never faded. Since Simon and Flora were home for summer break, I leaned on them hard to come along. Didn't even pretend to ask politely. I went straight for the guilt trip. "You haven't seen your grandpa in forever, and he won't be around forever." They caved. Claire said she was thrilled at the idea of a quiet house and planned to spend the day lost in her book. On the hour-long drive, Simon couldn't stop talking about a girl he'd met in his Philosophy 101 class, while Flora swore she'd get through college without letting relationships derail her plans. "Plenty of time for guys after I graduate," she insisted. That, of course, led straight into the familiar retelling of how their mom and I first met. A story they'd heard 100 times but still asked about. When we pulled up, Dad's face lit up. Seeing the kids wrap him in hugs and settle in for his well-worn stories seemed to put 10 years back in him. We ate lunch, laughed, and spent the afternoon soaking in each other's company. By noon, Dad dozed off in his recliner, and we all drifted to separate corners of the house. "Keep an eye on Grandpa," I told Simon and Flora. "I'll be back soon. Need to grab some gear to deal with that dead tree out back before it crashes on the roof." They settled in front of the TV, half watching the screen and half watching him. I climbed into the truck, intending to run home for the chainsaw, ropes, and whatever else I'd need. But when I hit the interstate exit, I don't know why, I suddenly veered toward Highway 40 instead. At the bottom of the hill, the Holiday Inn entrance came into view, and I turned in almost without thinking. There was the stop sign Gavin had mentioned, small, tucked out of the way, easy to miss. I circled the lot, ready to pull out again, when something froze me in place. Claire's car. I slowed down, checked twice. Sure, there were plenty of silver Camrys, but only one with her personalized plate, Con Woman. I parked, got out, and peered inside. Nothing unusual. Locked doors, empty interior, but I couldn't imagine a single good reason her car would be there. She'd said she was spending the day at home, reading. I grabbed my phone and called the house. No answer, straight to voicemail. So I dialed her cell. "Hi, honey," she chirped, cheerful and relaxed. "How's your day going?" I don't know what possessed me. I'd never lied to her before, but I did. "Oh, not much. Just picking up some groceries for Dad. Tried the house, but you weren't there, so I figured I'd try your cell. Where are you?" "At the mall," she said instantly. "Finished my book and decided to do a little shopping. That okay?" And there it was. A lie. Or at least I was almost certain it was. "Sure," I said lightly. "Just don't blow the kids' college fund." She laughed. "What time do you want me home?" "Probably around 6, she answered. "Want me to make dinner?" "No need. Don't worry about it. I'm not feeling great. Might just stay at Dad's tonight and send the kids back. I'll let you know." "Okay. Just call me when you finally decide," she whispered, her words heavy with quiet despair. "Did you head to the mall by yourself?" I asked, hesitant. "Or did someone go with you?" A knot of dread tightened in my stomach, bracing for another excuse. "I drove there alone," she answered softly. "No one's with me. I only got here a few minutes ago," she added after a pause. "Why are you asking?" "No reason," I muttered. "Well, I've got to run," she said. "Enjoy yourself, and keep an eye out for Gavin near that stop sign by the Holiday Inn when you head home tonight." Bye. I ended the call, just sitting there, waiting. For what, I didn't even know. Certainly not for what came next. A faint, muffled scream carried across from the direction of the hotel. My head snapped around, scanning the dim parking lot. Shadows. Silence. No movement. No clue where it came from. I perched uneasily on the hood of Claire's Camry, nerves prickling. Minutes later, a police cruiser rolled in and stopped nearby. Gavin stepped out. "Evening, Mr. Jordan. Did you make the 911 call?" "No, Gavin," I said, my voice flat. "That's odd. Dispatch got a report of someone breaking into a vehicle here." He glanced toward the motel. "I'll check in with the manager." "Gavin," I called as he started to walk off. "Yeah? Can I ask you something?" "Sure, anything." "When you go inside, could you see if Mrs. Jordan is there and, who she's with? I'll wait next door." Gavin froze for a moment, realization dawning on his face. "Wait. Oh, damn. I'm sorry, Mr. Jordan. I'll find out and come back to you." He climbed back into the cruiser and headed toward the motel entrance. I waited, and kept waiting. The silence grew heavier with every passing minute. Then, distant sirens split the night air, growing louder until an ambulance screeched to a halt at the motel doors. I watched paramedics rush inside, then reappear minutes later carrying someone out on a stretcher. The ambulance sped off, lights flashing. Gavin approached, his face pale, shaken. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jordan," he said quietly. "There's been an incident. They're taking your wife to county hospital. She tried to run through a sliding glass door. It didn't break. She's badly bruised, has a deep cut over her eye, and she's hysterical." Gavin hesitated, his tone dropping even lower. "The man she was with left right after they took her. I've got his name, address, and statement, but I can't give that to you directly. Come to the station tomorrow. File a Freedom of Information request. You'll get it." He extended his hand. "I'm truly sorry. I've always thought of you and Mrs. Jordan as family." I couldn't bring myself to take his hand. I just stared at it until he left. Only after his taillights faded into the distance did the tears finally come. I don't even know how I managed to drive back to Dad's house. I stood in the driveway, hollow, numb, without words. Flora saw me through the window and hurried outside. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't answer. She kept asking, louder each time, until my silence broke me and I collapsed into sobs, something my children had never seen. When she saw me break down, she cried too. Simon came out next, confusion and worry written on his face. Through choked words, I told them. Their mother was in the hospital. They needed to go help her. That was all. I couldn't bring myself to say more. Within moments, they were in the car, ready to leave. I tossed the keys to Simon. "I'm not coming," I muttered. "I'll stay here tonight." They stared at me, startled, but didn't argue. The car pulled away. After making sure Dad was okay, I sank onto the couch. My chest felt tight, my heart pounding. Tears ran silently as I stared at the floor. Dad rolled up beside me in his wheelchair and sat there quietly. "Matthew," he said softly, "what's eating at you?" I couldn't answer. Talking about things like this with him had always felt impossible. He was old school, kept his emotions locked away. Growing up, whenever I had a problem, his answer was always the same. "Be a man. You'll get over it." I expected the same now, so I said nothing. But instead, he spoke gently. "Let me tell you something I've never told you, or your sister, or anyone." He drew a long breath. "Right after you were born, I got in trouble with the law. I stole from my job. Your mom wanted a red dress, and we couldn't afford it, so I stole a tool and sold it. I got caught. I paid the company back, but they fired me and handed me over to the police. I got a year of probation. That part was easy. The hard part was your mother. She was angrier, no, more disappointed than I've ever seen her. Our marriage almost fell apart right then. She stayed cold for months. One day, she came home and told me about a possible job nearby, said I should interview for it in the morning. Then she hugged me, looked me straight in the eyes, and said she forgave me. His voice trembled. "Son, she forgave me, even after I nearly ruined everything we had." She humbled herself and allowed me back into her heart. From that day until the moment she drew her last breath, I lived in a way that gave her no reason to feel ashamed of me. It was her love, steady, forgiving, and unyielding, that molded me into a man far better than I ever believed I could be. I wounded her once, deeply, but her strength and grace surpassed anything I deserved. Together, somehow, we found a way through the storm. Matthew, I don't know every detail of what you're facing now, but it feels eerily familiar, as if I've walked this same painful road. Maybe what you need is forgiveness, or maybe you need to grant it, just as your mother forgave me. But there are times when forgiveness isn't possible, and only you can decide whether this is one of those times. Whatever choice you make, I trust it will be the one that honors your heart. I pray, with everything in me, that you'll find peace at the end of it. And son, I don't say this nearly enough, but I am so proud of who you've become. I love you more than words will ever reach. He placed his rough, time-worn hand over mine and lowered his head in silent prayer. When he was finished, he rose without speaking and slipped quietly into his bedroom. I stayed where I was, rooted to the couch, staring blankly as the sun sank beneath the horizon. Later, when my phone rang, I ignored it. When it rang again, I did the same. Sleep never came. I curled into the old couch, listening to the faint hum of crickets outside the window as the night stretched on endlessly. By the time morning arrived, I expected relief, a clean slate. But instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown. After fixing breakfast for Dad, I slipped out to the backyard. Alone, I began sorting through old boxes and forgotten tools, my hands moving without thought. Around midday, a gentle hand rested on my shoulder. "Dad, are you okay?" Flora's voice trembled, soft and raw, her eyes swollen from crying. I shook my head. "No." She lowered herself beside me, wrapping her arms around my neck in the same way she had as a child. Her tears mingled with mine, and for a long while we stayed that way, silent, clinging to each other until we finally found the courage to speak. I remained quiet, afraid that if I opened my mouth, the anger boiling inside me would spill over. Flora was the one who broke the silence. "Dad, Mom's alive. She's hurt, but she's going to recover. Concussion, 4 stitches above her eye, broken nose, bruises all over. The doctors say her body will heal, but her spirit—" Her voice cracked. "She's broken inside." She swallowed hard before continuing. "They gave her something to help her sleep, but she keeps waking up screaming your name. Marissa came. We were all there. She just kept asking why you weren't there with her." Flora hesitated, voice faltering as she went on. "She told us everything, all of it. I'm sure you already know, so I won't say it again." Her next words shook with emotion. "I told her I couldn't forgive her, that what she did was cruel, unforgivable. I told her I hated her." "Wait!" I cut in sharply. "Don't ever say you hate your mother," I said firmly. "She loves you, and deep down, you love her too. She made a terrible mistake, and I have to figure out how to handle that. She cheated on you, Dad. She lied to you and to all of us. That doesn't change the fact that she's still your mother." "Yes, she's my mom," Flora whispered. "But she's also your wife. After everything, do you still love her?" I didn't answer right away. I stared off into the distance, trying to untangle the mess inside my head and heart. "I don't know," I said finally. "Right now I feel numb. I need to get my emotions under control before I make any decisions. I can't think straight yet. It hurts too much." "Daddy," she whispered, "no matter what you decide, I'll be here. I might not agree, but I'll stand by you. I love you." We held each other until the tears ran dry. In the stillness that followed, we watched a hummingbird dart between the holly bushes and the old oak tree, each of us lost in separate thoughts. The weekend passed in a haze, every hour stretching longer than the last. I stayed at Dad's house, speaking only to Marissa and Simon over the phone, refusing every call and message from Claire. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, not yet. By Monday morning, I called my boss to ask for a few more days off, explaining only that it was a family emergency. Then I went back outside, sitting in the same backyard, letting the weight of everything sink deeper. Flora hovered nearby, always close, as if afraid of what I might do if left alone. Over and over, I replayed 25 years of marriage in my mind. We'd had fights, every couple does, but the good had always outweighed the bad. Now everything was shattered. I didn't even know the full extent of what she'd done, though my kids probably did. And honestly, I didn't want every detail. What I already knew was unbearable. More would destroy me. The plate of food Flora had brought sat untouched beside a crumpled paper towel soaked with tears. 2 days had passed since my world collapsed, and still, I had no answers. No plan. Nothing but pain. "Hey, Matthew." Her voice cut through my thoughts like glass. Without turning, I muttered, "Hi, Claire." She dragged a chair across the ground and sat across from me. I couldn't see my own face, but from the look on hers, I knew we were both wrecked. Her hands, once graceful, always steady, were battered. One was bruised, the other wrapped in a bandage. "I'm so sorry, Matthew," she whispered. her gaze fixed on the ground. The first time I laid eyes on her after everything, I almost didn't recognize her. A thick strip of white bandage stretched across the bridge of her nose, keeping the shattered bone aligned. One side of her face was buried under gauze, concealing whatever sutures had been stitched beneath it. The visible eye, swollen, ringed with bruises that shifted from black to sickly yellow, looked hollow, defeated. She seemed wrecked, hardly human anymore. Flora's words from earlier echoed in my head, like the aftermath of a train wreck. Once, she had been radiant. Now she was barely a shadow of the woman I knew. I couldn't tell if I truly thought she looked ruined, or if my heartbreak was twisting the way I saw her. Maybe it was both. "Matthew," she said at last, her voice trembling on my name. I came here to apologize. I know it's worthless now. Sorry won't fix anything, but it's all I have left." Her glance drifted toward the driveway. "Marissa drove me here. My hands were shaking too badly to drive myself. I had to face you, to look you in the eye, to make you understand what I've done. To you, to us." "Matthew," she whispered again, "I ruined everything. Not you. Me. This is all on me. You never deserved the hell I put you through." Her voice fractured, tears forcing their way into her words. "And the worst part? The pain I feel now is worse than anything you could imagine, because I know I caused it. I shattered you, and in doing that, I shattered myself. Maybe I destroyed the only thing that ever mattered more to me than my own life. I need to tell you what happened. I need you to know. But—" She stopped herself, breath hitching. "No, I can't hear from you yet. I can't. What I already know is tearing me apart. If I hear more, if I hear what you're thinking, it'll finish me off. Please, just let me speak. If you hear me out, Matthew, if you understand why, maybe it will mean something. Maybe you'll forgive me. I can't lose you. I love you, and I need you to understand why I failed." The words stumbled from her mouth, halting and jagged, like she was battling herself with every sentence. "It started— No, forget how it started. I have to finish this. Please, please just listen." "No," I said flatly. "We can fix this," she begged. "If you'll let me talk, we can fix it. We can be us again. We can be a family again." I said no. I stood, turned my back on her, and walked away. Her sobbing followed me into the kitchen, mixing with the ache in my own bruised arms, the same bruises left from the fight. "Daddy?" Flora's voice came softly behind me. "Please, she needs you to hear her. She needs to say it so she can beg for forgiveness. If you don't listen, you'll both stay broken." I spun toward my eldest, anger sharp in my tone. "Flora, if you honestly believe listening to her excuses will fix anything, you're more naive than she is. If she wants to ease her guilt, she can write me a letter. But I'm not sitting here, letting her justify why she threw away 25 years of marriage and gutted me in the process. I can't. I don't have it in me to forgive her." I walked out, got into my car, and drove. No idea where I was headed or whether I'd come back. Tears didn't come. I'd spent them all already, soaked into the concrete of my father's patio. I just needed space. Quiet. Somewhere to think. When I came back to my dad's house the next day, Flora was the one to open the door. She wrapped me in a hug, and for the first time in what felt like forever, someone smiled at me. It wasn't much, but I clung to it. That smile reminded me that happiness still existed somewhere, even if I couldn't reach it yet. Maybe someday, I thought, I'd find mine again. Dad was happy to see me too, though I could still see the muted sorrow in his eyes, buried under the relief. That night, over dinner, I finally spoke. "Dad, I've decided. I'm moving in. At least for now. I need to get away from everything. And let's be honest, you could use someone to cook and clean around here. No offense, but I've tasted your cooking. Eggs and bacon aren't enough to live on." I turned toward my daughter. "Flora, I'll need help grabbing my things from the house. I can't be there while your mother's around. Get what I need for work, too. Just tell everyone I'll be staying here until I figure out what's next. Say your mom and I are separated. Don't give details. Leave it at that." "Okay, Dad," she said softly. "Make me a list and I'll bring it tonight. Want me to tell Mom anything?" "Tell her I'm here, and tell her not to call. I'll reach out when I'm ready." We spent the evening sorting out what life would look like now. Dad never mentioned Claire, never brought up the betrayal or the chaos of the past few days. Instead, we dusted off the old checkerboard, a relic from my childhood. He beat me effortlessly, just like he always used to. Later, Flora returned, car loaded with my things and hers. "I brought my stuff too," she announced firmly. "I'm staying. Guest room's mine until school starts." There was steel in her voice as she carried the bags inside. "What happened?" I asked. Her face tightened with anger. "You won't believe what my sister said. She called you childish. Said you should just go back home and forgive Mom." Her jaw clenched hard. "And Simon? Even worse. He said everyone cheats eventually, that there's nothing wrong with it. Said you should just forgive her and get yourself a girlfriend on the side." She shook her head, disgusted. "Can you believe that? Unbelievable assholes." "Flora," I said quietly, struggling to keep my voice steady, "I can't listen to any more of this. You're blaming yourself for something that was never yours to carry. You're sitting in your grandfather's house like you've committed some terrible crime, while everyone else treats you as if you're the villain of this story. But the truth, it wasn't you who broke everything apart. It was your mother. She's the one who crossed a line, and she doesn't deserve your forgiveness. That's part of the reason I even came here. Your siblings think you should crawl back, apologize, and pretend everything is fine. I couldn't stomach that, so when I grabbed your things, I packed my own and walked out. I knew there was no point in trying to reason with you. Once you made up your mind, you never budged. So I just let you vent, let you pour out every ounce of anger you had bottled up inside. The following 2 months, I tried pretending life was normal. I kept going to work, helping around the house, even taught Flora how to put together a vegetable lasagna. Every couple of days, Marissa or Simon would call, asking when I was coming home. I could almost picture Claire hovering in the background, listening for my answer. Every time, I told them the same thing. I wasn't coming back yet, and I didn't want to hear her name. Sometimes they pushed, trying to convince me otherwise, but I always hung up before they got too far. Then one day, Simon appeared at the door, said he needed to talk. We stepped out to the backyard and sat on the patio. The air between us was heavy. "Dad," he began carefully, "you have to come home. It's been 2 months, and Mom's only gotten worse." He explained he'd be heading back to school soon and couldn't leave Marissa to handle things alone. "We don't know what she might do when nobody's there. She cries non-stop. She barely eats, hardly sleeps. She's lost so much weight it's frightening. Even your friends have been dropping by because they're worried about her. She doesn't do anything but sit in the house and mope. We've tried everything, taking her out to eat, shopping, even just walks, but she falls apart every time. Dad, this has gone on long enough. She's apologized. You're both in pain. It's time to let it go and come home." I looked at him. This boy I'd coached through baseball and soccer, the one I'd guided toward his Eagle Scout badge, the son whose grades and judgment I'd once bragged about. But now he saw things differently. Somewhere along the way, his view of right and wrong had shifted. He seemed to think what his mother did could just be erased, forgotten. And if he could excuse her choices, what would that mean for his own someday? I'd always taught my kids that promises were sacred, that keeping your word mattered more than anything. I'd done my best to live by that myself, hoping it would sink in. But standing there, listening to him, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Simon," I said flatly, "you're an adult now, so I'll speak to you like one. Get out of my house." "How dare you show up here and act like I'm the problem? I didn't ruin this family. If you honestly think what your mother did is forgivable, then you're not the man I thought you were. Go back home. Look after her. I'll stay here until I decide otherwise." Leave now before I make you leave. I stood and walked back inside. Minutes later, I heard his car pulling away. When August rolled around, Flora returned to school. I hadn't heard a word from Marissa or Simon since. I figured Simon had gone back to campus and Marissa was splitting time between her new husband and Claire. Nobody called to check in, not about me, not about Dad. It was just the two of us now. By mid-September, a letter from Claire arrived. I opened it, read the first few lines, then shoved it back into the envelope and hid it in my dresser drawer. I wasn't ready. I'd told Marissa once that if Claire really wanted to clear her conscience, she should write everything down and send it to me. And when the letter finally came, I couldn't bring myself to face it. The wound was still too fresh, so I buried myself in routine and pretended it didn't exist. Flora still called every couple of days, checking in on me and her grandfather. She mentioned talking to Marissa and Simon. They were doing the same for their mother. She promised she'd be at my birthday in October and hoped by then I'd have made a decision. Staying stuck in limbo isn't helping anyone, she told me. I said we'd talk about it when I was ready. October 30th came, my 50th birthday, a milestone I'd never imagined celebrating like this. Flora showed up first thing in the morning, all smiles and energy, insisting she was taking me and Dad out for Italian. She joked about showing me what real lasagna tasted like. I laughed, for the first time in months, a real laugh. That night, after getting Dad settled in bed, I followed Flora back to her place. We cracked open a couple of beers and sat quietly in the living room, the silence between us calm, almost peaceful. "So," she finally asked, straightforward as ever, "have you made up your mind yet?" I exhaled slowly. "I've realized something," I began. "I don't have all the answers. Maybe I never will. I still can't understand why she did what she did, but I know this. Refusing to speak to her hasn't fixed anything either." I finally read her letter. And I think most of what she wrote is probably true, but I still can't comprehend how someone could make choices that reckless. This conflict has stretched on for so long that I can hardly imagine finding a way back. Even so, I've decided to sit down with her, really sit down, and talk. Maybe we'll manage to uncover some small thread of understanding. Maybe not. But I owe it to both of us to listen, to speak honestly, and to hear her side as much as I want mine heard. If after that, I still can't believe her, I'll have no choice but to end this marriage once and for all. The truth is, I've been just as empty without her as you say she's been without me. Still, I'll do whatever it takes to move forward, however that ends up looking. However painful, I've made up my mind to face her and finally see where things stand. I'd been planning to call tomorrow, rehearsing the words over and over in my head when Flora's phone rang and shattered my thoughts mid-sentence. "It's Marissa," she murmured, after checking the screen. Before I could say a word, she stepped out into the night, the chill from the open door creeping into the room as she disappeared outside. 5 minutes later, she came back in. Her face was drained of color, her eyes wide and glassy, like someone who'd seen something too terrible to name. She glanced at me, then at the floor, then at the painting above the fireplace, her gaze darting everywhere but staying nowhere. Finally, she looked down at her phone and without a word collapsed into my arms, sobbing so hard I could barely hold her up. I clutched her close, waiting in silence, my own heart pounding, until the storm inside her began to ebb. When she finally pulled away, wiping her cheeks on her sleeve, she looked at me and whispered in a voice barely holding together, "Dad, Mom's gone. Marissa found her in the bathroom. She took all her sleeping pills, the ones the doctor gave her. That's all Marissa said." The words hit me like nothing I'd ever known. I heard them, but they didn't make sense. My mind refused to form the reality they described. Death was a concept, not something that could apply to her, not something that could be real in this moment. My chest tightened. Breathing felt impossible. Claire was gone? The days that followed were a blur of nightmares I couldn't wake from. Planning a funeral for the only woman I'd ever truly loved, the mother of my children, the partner I'd shared a quarter-century of my life with, felt unbearable. Yet there was no escaping it. No matter what had happened between us, her betrayal, my anger, the distance that grew until it swallowed us whole, she had still been my world. Around the kids, I put on a mask of calm, trying to seem steady for their sake, but they weren't fooled. Inside, I was falling apart. At night, I'd retreat to the backyard and sit alone, staring at the rusted swing set that hadn't moved in 15 years. I'd remember when Marissa, Simon, and Flora tore across that same grass, wild and laughing, with Claire chasing them, hair flying in the wind. I'd trace the outline of the azalea bushes we planted together when we first moved in, recall the barbecues, the late-night talks, even the nights we made love under the stars. Those memories used to feel warm, a kind of refuge. Now they were ice in my veins. And through all that grief, one thought gnawed at me without mercy. How much of this was my fault? I didn't give her the pills, but I did push her to that ledge. My silence, my stubbornness, my refusal to face her, they weighed on her more than I wanted to admit. I had wanted her to feel my pain, to understand the way her betrayal gutted me. I loved her so deeply that her unfaithfulness shattered me completely. And in my anger, I think I may have shattered her too. I never wished for her death. I only wanted her to see what she had done to me. Maybe she did. Maybe she couldn't bear it. I'll never know. All I know is this: she broke something sacred between us, and I, in turn, broke her. We were both guilty. May God forgive us both. Tomorrow is her funeral. The last time I will ever look upon her face. I have to keep myself together. I have to welcome friends and family, stand beside my children, and somehow say goodbye. A slam at the front door pulled me from my thoughts, followed by the sound of a car engine roaring into the distance. Marissa came up from the back, her footsteps soft as she settled into the chair across from mine in the yard. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked quietly. "No," I said truthfully. "Not really." We sat there for a long time, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the evening wind. Then Marissa turned toward me, her next words slicing sharper than anything I had braced myself for. "You know this never would have happened if you'd just come home and forgiven her," she said, voice low but steady. "She made a mistake. Haven't you made mistakes too? She forgave you when you did. She said she couldn't live without you. It was your pride that killed her." I stared at her, stunned, mouth open but speechless. My own daughter was laying her mother's death at my feet. I wasn't the one who cheated. I wasn't the one who lied to the family for half a year. I wasn't the one who swallowed the pills. Yet somehow, in that moment, I felt accused, as though I'd been the one to lead her by the hand to the edge. Marissa went on, her voice now matter-of-fact, almost detached. "Tomorrow's going to be hard. Everyone's coming back here after the service. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to stay if you can't handle it. Simon and Mom's friends will manage." For a moment, I wondered if I was hearing her right, if she was truly suggesting I step aside at my own wife's funeral. But my thoughts were too clouded, my emotions too raw, to untangle her meaning. All I knew was this: I couldn't survive another fight with my daughter. Not tonight. Not on the eve of her mother's farewell. I pushed myself up from where I had been lying and walked into the house. My steps carried me down the staircase to the basement family room, the place I'd used as a refuge through the night. Next chapter. I gathered the blankets and pillow I had slept with, shoved them into the laundry basket, and changed into my suit and tie. By the time I returned upstairs, the children were already dressed, sitting wordlessly in the living room. My father rested nearby in an armchair, his face drawn and weary, as if every ounce of strength had left him. Flora came toward me silently, reached up, and adjusted my tie with the same steady motion her mother used to do so often. I lowered my head, kissed her forehead, and took her hand as we stepped outside toward the waiting limousine. Her small fingers clung to mine the entire walk. She didn't speak, not to me, not to anyone, only kept her eyes fixed on the ground, withdrawn and silent. At the funeral home, the entrance hall was crowded with familiar faces. The moment we crossed the threshold, the low hum of conversation died away. The crowd seemed to instinctively part, creating a path for us to pass through. As we made our way into the viewing room, I felt dozens of eyes lock on me. But what I saw in their expressions wasn't sympathy. It wasn't sorrow. It was judgment. Cold, unmistakable contempt. I tried nodding politely to a few acquaintances, but they looked away, pretending to busy themselves with others. My boss and his wife stood at the edge of the room. He stepped forward, shook my hand, and whispered a quiet condolence. His kindness felt out of place in the oppressive silence. Around him, the others simply stared, their gazes sharp and condemning. He was the only one who spoke to me. Strangely enough, those same people who couldn't look at me in the eye offered gentle words to the children. I didn't understand it. I had little experience with funerals. The only one I'd truly lived through was my mother's, and this felt nothing like that. Flora led me toward the casket, and we knelt together in front of it for our final goodbye. Soft organ music played faintly overhead, but underneath it, I could still catch the murmurs from the crowd behind us. Snatches of whispers broke through the hymn. Heartless bastard, left her, all his fault, hypocrite. He killed her. Flora's hand tightened around mine. She'd heard it too. The preacher spoke in gentle tones, trying to soothe the air, and a close friend of Claire's sang one of her favorite hymns, not the standard funeral hymn, but one chosen especially for her. When the song ended, she shook hands with Marissa and Simon, offered them comfort, and returned to her seat without a single glance at me or Flora. One by one, people came forward when invited to share their memories. Marissa was the last to rise. Her words were about mercy, about forgiveness, about how Christ forgave even those who crucified him, and how we too must forgive. I am rarely slow to grasp meaning, but as I listened to my daughter speak about grace, I understood. At last, it all became clear. At the graveside, a sharp wind whipped across the mourners, scattering dry leaves and carrying away fragments of the preacher's final words. When the prayers ended, he handed each of us a single red rose to lay atop the casket. I stepped forward first. Flora followed me, then Marissa and Simon. My father's old co-worker pushed his wheelchair up so he could place his own rose. It was one of the hardest moments of my life. Before leaving, I turned to Marissa and Simon, unable to hold back the bitterness that had been festering inside me. My voice came out low and hard. Marissa, Simon, I know the truth now and I've made my decision, I said. For what you've done, for poisoning people against me, for painting me as a monster, you're dead to me. Just like the woman we buried today. Don't come to my house. Don't speak to me. From this moment forward, you are no longer my children. I turned to the rest of the mourners, the people who had once called themselves my friends. That goes for all of you as well, I said. The silence that followed was heavy, stunned. Without another word, I took Flora's hand and walked to the limousine. My father sat quietly in his chair as we drove away, leaving Marissa and Simon behind at the cemetery. Of all the people who had once been close to us, only my boss, his wife, and two elderly neighbors from across the street had come. They were the last friends I had. Them and Flora. Marissa and Simon returned to her family's home afterward, finding comfort there. Later, Flora told me what people were saying, that everyone believed I had abandoned Claire after one mistake, that I refused to forgive her, and that I had driven her to take her own life. To them, I was guilty. Next chapter. Eventually, Flora returned to school, leaving me alone in the quiet house with nothing but my thoughts and the weight of everything that had happened. When she came home for winter break or spring vacation, it felt as though sunlight cut briefly through the darkness. Marissa stayed with her husband's family, and Simon went back to college. In between their visits, I buried myself in work. It was the only thing that dulled the ache, though never completely. Even months later, I would wake in the middle of the night, half expecting Claire to be lying beside me, or haunted by vivid images of her and Jacob Jasper in some cheap roadside hotel. She had confessed everything in her letter. The affair with Jacob, our former neighbor, which had begun long after they moved across town. The same man had even stood beside us at our 25th wedding anniversary celebration. Time dragged forward, and the pain eventually dulled into something bearable. Never gone, but livable. Marissa had a baby girl and named her Claire. A year later, she gave birth to a son named Chance, after her husband's father. I never met either of my grandchildren. Simon married his college sweetheart. I received an invitation to their wedding, but I didn't go. 2 years after their marriage began unraveling, she finally decided to file for divorce. It became clear he had adopted his mother's habits, undermining his marriage through repeated acts of infidelity. He justified his behavior by claiming everyone inevitably cheats, a viewpoint I suspect was directly responsible for the breakdown of his marriage. Soon after, he moved to California, and our lives ceased intersecting altogether following the funeral. I learned about these events indirectly through Flora, who habitually shares snippets of information whenever she sees fit. Flora insists it's essential for me to remain updated, emphasizing that regardless of their missteps, they will always be my children. At my job, my supervisor was far more than a boss. He was my trusted friend and confidant. He stood by me during my hardest days, listening without complaint whenever I needed support, and showing immense patience when illness kept me away from work. However, in a moment of blunt honesty, he once informed me I had exactly 1 year to regain my strength or face being replaced. That direct exchange became my motivation, driving me to excel as the most capable manager our company had ever known. Indeed, my performance surged dramatically, and after 4 successful years of rebuilding my life, I received an offer to become a senior manager in Florida. Within just 3 months, I sold my previous home, moved into a smaller house in Orlando, and assumed responsibility for overseeing the distribution center serving the entire eastern United States. Amid this major transition, I hadn't forgotten Bo, who had quietly tolerated being overlooked. To make amends in our new environment, I welcomed another young golden retriever into our family. Today, the 3 of us live happily in our cozy residence. Back in Maryland, I had felt isolated, abandoned by virtually everyone I had once called a friend. Few bothered even to speak to me, let alone extend an invitation anywhere. Life had irrevocably shifted. I had become invisible, a stranger in my own neighborhood. Meanwhile, Flora thrived academically, graduating with honors and swiftly landing a prestigious entry-level management position at a well-known entertainment venue in Florida. She announced her intention to stay with me temporarily until she secured her own place. Privately, I hoped she wouldn't rush. 1 year after Claire's death, my father also passed away, marking the definitive end of an era. 5 turbulent years had elapsed since my life turned entirely upside down. I'd lost almost everything meaningful except for one priceless connection, my daughter, Flora. Yet even she was eager to carve out her own future, leaving me to face the daunting task of reconstructing my life. Without a fresh purpose, I feared ending up as a solitary old man devoted only to his dogs, a scenario both pitiful and deeply saddening. It soon became clear that I needed a renewed purpose. Writing had always been a pastime I enjoyed, though recently it had been confined to mundane business reports. As my professional life grew monotonous and my age advanced, I began returning to the creation of short stories. Unexpectedly, a couple of these stories found their way into a local literary magazine. One evening, as Flora spent time with her boyfriend, I started sketching an outline for another tale. This outline quickly evolved, however, turning into a deeply personal reflection of one of the most challenging periods of my life. Aware that it would inevitably stir painful emotions, I initially hesitated but eventually began writing one night. After 4 months of dedicated evening work, I held a completed manuscript that genuinely felt impactful. Still, Unwilling to expose such intimate details publicly, I carefully placed it in a box, hidden away on a shelf in my den. For me, the true healing emerged from the writing process itself. Confronting and overcoming these difficult memories allowed me to rediscover a sense of vitality. To further nurture my rekindled passion, I enrolled in a creative writing course at the nearby community college. Most students were young adults still mastering basic grammar, though 2 other seniors joined me. Together, we formed a partnership, eager to demonstrate genuine literary talent to our younger classmates in Orange County, Florida. Maurice, a retiree, intended to write about his family's Civil War experiences, while Alicia, recently widowed, was exploring courses to bolster her employability. Alicia, having dedicated decades to raising 5 children, quietly retired to Florida, reinventing herself using her late husband's insurance money. Conversations between us soon uncovered striking similarities. Remembering the power of listening, I absorbed every detail she shared, noting each carefully. Nearly 30 years had passed since my last attempt at romance, so attentive listening became crucial. Alicia eventually noticed that our interactions had been mostly one-sided. She began probing gently, curious about my own story and why I was alone in Central Florida, attending a community college writing class. Initially hesitant, I offered a brief account, attempting quickly to shift the conversation back toward her. But Alicia persisted gently, patiently urging me to open up, until finally I admitted my past wasn't easily shared. If she truly wanted to understand me better, I suggested, she would have to join me for dinner at my home the following Saturday. Her response was a radiant, joyful smile, the brightest I had witnessed in years, as she readily accepted my invitation. After dinner, Alicia expressed her delight as we stood together on my patio, enjoying the gentle evening breeze beneath one of my palm trees. "Dinner was wonderful, Matthew," she complimented warmly. "I've seldom met a man capable of preparing vegetable lasagna, let alone making it so deliciously. Are there other hidden talents I should know about?" "You already know most things," I responded with a modest smile. "I manage Folks Industries' East Coast Distribution Center. My daughter Flora lives here, though she thoughtfully chose to give us space tonight. My wife passed away a little over 5 years ago. I have 2 other children, and you've already met my dogs, Bo and Luke." With a small shrug, I added, "That's pretty much it. There's nothing else particularly remarkable." Alicia playfully insisted, "You promised me details, remember?" "That's exactly why I'm here, to finally learn your story. I'm still waiting." Rather than answering aloud, I quietly rose to my feet and slipped inside the house. When I returned, I carried a plain box in my hands. Inside was a manuscript, my novel, an intimate reflection of the most defining moments of my life. "Alicia," I began, "there's something you probably don't know. I've been writing for years. A few of my short stories even found their way into a small literary journal, though most of my work has never left my computer. Some of these stories are drawn directly from my own experiences. Others were born entirely from imagination. Long before I ever thought about taking a creative writing class, I poured myself into a deeply personal project. Until now, I never knew what to do with it. The box contained that very project, an unflinching portrait of my family's history. Writing it was how I coped with the storm that followed my wife's death and the shattering of the life we once shared. I'd never shown it to anyone, but I desperately wanted Alicia's opinion. "To be honest," I said with a nervous laugh, "I sometimes think it's only good for propping open windows on windy days. But I respect your judgment, and I'd truly value your honest reaction." She met my eyes with warmth and an unmistakable glimmer of admiration. "I would love to read it," she said softly. "What's it called?" "Fairweather Friends," I replied. Her brows lifted slightly as she took the manuscript into her hands. "It's substantial," she remarked. "Only 987 pages," I joked, trying to mask my unease. "But I mean it. I want your unfiltered thoughts, even if they're brutal. I can't ask my daughter. She lived through everything in those pages, and I refuse to reopen old wounds." "Matthew, she said. "It would be an honor to read this. But you should know, I'm very straightforward. When I give feedback, I don't sugarcoat. If something needs to be said, I say it." She smiled, almost apologetically. "I'll start tomorrow." The tension between us dissolved after that. Conversation flowed easily, from our creative writing class to the quiet nightlife options nearby, and eventually to movies we both loved. The evening carried an unusual peace. Florida nights are rarely this comfortable. When I walked her to her car, she kissed me lightly on the cheek. Cleaning up later, I felt a spark of youth I hadn't felt in years. The next week came and went without a word from Alicia. She didn't attend our class, didn't call. A slow unease began to take root. Had she regretted taking my manuscript? Did she think I was strange, someone to avoid? I considered phoning her but hesitated, afraid of appearing intrusive. 2 weeks later, I returned home to a voicemail. "Hi, Matthew. It's Alicia. I'd love for you to come to dinner this Friday. My son will be visiting, and I'd like you two to meet. I might also have a little surprise for you. Bring a bottle or two of that white wine we enjoyed last time. Dinner's at 7. Let me know if you can make it. Bye." Friday evening, dressed simply but presentably, I arrived with 2 bottles of 2012 Balthasar Ress Riesling Kabinett Hattenheimer Schützenhaus. An Orlando magazine had called it one of the best whites of the year. Knowing little about wine myself, I trusted their judgment and hoped it would complement whatever Alicia was preparing. "Matthew, come in." Alicia greeted me with a bright smile as she opened the door. She guided me through her cozy home, leading finally to a softly lit patio. A table for 3 was set with candles and gleaming glassware. From between 2 orange trees, a man emerged, his features touched by the flicker of candlelight. "Matthew, this is my son Barry. Barry, meet Matthew Jordan." Barry extended his hand with an easy smile. "Pleasure to meet you. My mom's told me a lot about you. Good things. And trust me, she doesn't say that about many people." "Nice to meet you as well," I replied, though I suspect she's exaggerated. I'm really just an ordinary guy from our writing class. Alicia laughed softly and ushered us to the table. She whisked the wine inside to chill and returned a moment later, sliding into the seat beside me. She reached for my hand, her expression luminous. "Matthew," she began gently, "I need to confess something. I invited you tonight under slightly false pretenses. We'll eat soon, but first, there's something important you should know." My chest tightened with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I asked Barry here because of you," she continued. "I did something I probably should have asked permission for first, but I didn't. Please forgive me." She drew a slow breath. "I read your manuscript in 2 days. I couldn't stop. Matthew, your story, it's raw and beautiful. When I reached the chapters about moving in with your father after your wife's death, I cried. When you wrote about your children, I cried again. It's the most honest, powerful thing I've ever read." Her hand tightened around mine. "I couldn't keep it to myself. I sent it to Barry. He doesn't usually read unsolicited manuscripts, but I insisted. He read it and loved it. He wants to help you edit it, polish it, and get it published. Isn't that incredible?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, feeling simultaneously foolish and overwhelmed. Barry stepped in, his smile reassuring. "She's right, Mr. Jordan," he said quietly. "Without hesitation, I can say this is the most remarkable first novel I've ever come across, and I've read more debuts than I could begin to count. That's not an exaggeration. My role at Prentice Press in New York is assistant managing editor, and part of my job is combing through the submissions we receive from aspiring authors. Every month, nearly 100 manuscripts find their way onto my desk. I read them all, judge their potential, and forward the standouts to 2 colleagues. If the 3 of us agree a manuscript shows real promise, we begin the editing process and move toward publication. Your book didn't just pass through those steps, it soared through them. We've decided to publish it. We can go over the finer points after dinner, but right now I want to tell you this. What you've created is extraordinary. It's the kind of story that will linger with readers long after they've turned the last page. I sat there in stunned silence, unable to form a single coherent thought. I'm sure my expression went from blank to ridiculous in the span of seconds. Alicia, watching me carefully, broke into a wide grin, clearly enjoying my speechlessness. After a moment, she stood, kissed me lightly on the forehead, and headed toward the kitchen. While she prepared dinner, tossing salad with effortless grace, I slowly found my voice again, and soon we were deep in conversation about the novel. We spoke about the themes that struck us most, the moments that moved us. At one point, Alicia's eyes shimmered with tears, and I realized I was on the verge of crying too. We ate her version of mahi-mahi, perfectly simple and tender, and kept talking long into the meal. Dessert was warm peach cobbler, the kind of comfort food that feels like home. Over dessert, Barry walked me through what would happen next, the editing schedule, marketing plans, and the reality of royalties. He made sure I understood this wasn't a ticket to instant wealth, just the beginning of a longer road. By the time Barry dozed off in his chair, my head was spinning with everything I'd learned. Alicia poured the last of the wine, and the two of us sat outside, letting the evening breeze wash over us as we talked about what it might feel like to join the company of writers like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling. I knew I wasn't anywhere near their level, but imagining it felt intoxicating. When reality finally returned, it was well past midnight and time for me to go. Alicia walked me to my car, and instead of the polite cheek kiss I'd grown used to, she kissed me fully, deeply, so deeply it felt like she touched something in me I thought was long dead. At 55, I suddenly remembered I was still alive. I hadn't felt anything like that since Claire. The memory of Claire still hurt. Over the following 3 months, I worked hand in hand with one of Prentice's editors to refine and perfect the manuscript. By the time we were done, neither of us could find a single flaw worth fixing. We met in person only once. Most of our work unfolded through phone calls and endless chains of email. The first step was moving my Word document into their specialized editing software, a tool excellent for revisions, but frustrating for writing anything new. Once the manuscript felt finished, they sent me a printed proof by overnight courier. I spent the entire weekend hunched over it, scrutinizing every sentence, every comma. Each read through uncovered tiny adjustments that made the story sharper, cleaner. My editor had warned me this would happen, and she was absolutely right. Balancing this with my day job at Fox Industries wasn't easy. Days were spent at the office, evenings belonged to the novel. Flora, ever supportive, was thrilled for me, but refused to read the manuscript until I had an official copy in hand. She took it upon herself to make sure I ate well, got some exercise, and unwound at night, fussing over me like a protective older sister. Alicia, meanwhile, visited mostly on weekends. She said she didn't want to interrupt my creative momentum. We'd either go out to eat or cook something simple at home, talking about everything, no subject off limits. In truth, Alicia helped me in ways no therapist ever had. Talking to her about Claire released something I'd been carrying for years. For the first time, I admitted to myself that I'd never fully healed from what happened between us. We had both been broken in our own ways, both responsible. Strangely, acknowledging that brought me peace. By the time I sent in my latest round of revisions, Alicia promised me a personal celebration for finishing. That night, she stayed over, and we celebrated in the most intimate way, again and again. When Flora unexpectedly stopped by, she realized I had company, offered a knowing smile, and headed to her boyfriend's place for the night. Alicia had awakened a part of me I thought was gone forever. The book officially released on May 1st. Part of my contract required me to attend signings across the country, including one in my hometown of Ellicott City, Maryland. The thought of it filled me with equal parts excitement and dread. I took 3 weeks off work for the tour. To outsiders, an author's life might seem glamorous, effortless even. The truth? It's nothing like that. For nearly a month, my days followed a relentless pattern, catching flights or trains, checking into hotel rooms I barely had time to unpack in, then heading straight to events where readers lined up, eager to share how the story had touched them. I loved hearing their stories, feeling their excitement, but the constant travel drained me fast. The cities blurred together, hotels felt interchangeable, airports became a single endless hallway. Twice, in different cities, Alicia surprised me by showing up to have her copy signed. Those moments transformed the grind into something magical. She played the shy fan. I played the worldly author sweeping her off her feet. She stayed overnight each time, soothing the exhaustion in ways only she could. And when she left, the quiet that followed cut deep. We called often, but phone calls couldn't replace the comfort of holding her. Somewhere along the road, I realized what I was feeling. Love. Not infatuation. Real, undeniable love. I prayed she felt the same. The last stop on the tour was Ellicott City, the place where it all began. I'd asked the publisher to make it the final stop, and they had graciously agreed. I knew the bookstore hosting the signing almost by heart. It sat only a few miles from the house I'd once called home. The event was scheduled to begin at noon, sharp, and stretch until 4 in the afternoon. When I stepped through the entrance, I was met with the unexpected sight of a long line already snaking through the aisles. At the front of the queue stood a table stacked high with pristine copies of my book, around 50 of them, its cover prominently displayed on a large poster behind the table alongside my photograph and the event's schedule. As I scanned the faces in the crowd, a wave of familiarity struck me. There, at the very front, stood my former boss and his wife. I walked straight to them, hugging them tightly, our reunion warm but brief. Before we had time to properly catch up, an event coordinator gestured for me to take my seat and begin signing. In hurried tones, we traded phone numbers, email addresses, and home addresses, and I promised to treat them to dinner the next time I came to town. The happiness of seeing them again nearly distracted me from the growing line behind them. I began signing books, greeting each person with a quick word or a smile, pausing now and then to pose for photographs with readers who requested them. The experience unfolded far better than I had dared to expect. About 30 minutes in, I looked up and spotted an old friend stepping forward with a copy of my book in hand. I remembered him instantly. He'd been at Claire's funeral, one of those who couldn't bring himself to meet my gaze or speak to me back then. I forced a polite smile, signed his book, and shook his hand. Then he leaned in close and murmured, "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I didn't understand until I read this." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and walked away. That quiet apology set the tone for the rest of the afternoon. One after another, people I had once considered friends came forward, offering hesitant apologies for having judged me wrongly. Their voices were subdued, faces marked with a mix of regret and humility. Each apology was both comforting and strangely unsettling. The biggest surprise of the day came when Lena Jasper approached my table, a faint, almost uncertain smile on her face as she greeted me with, "Hi, Matthew." Her voice carried a trace of caution, something between contrition and nervousness. "After everything that's happened, I thought I should come say something. I can't undo what Jacob did to you, but you should know I left him not long after Claire passed. We've been divorced for 4 years now, and I'm engaged to a contractor from Annapolis." She hesitated, studying me carefully. "Oh, and those rumors you might have heard? The ones about you tracking Jacob down to settle the score? That came from me. He must have believed it, because he quit his job overnight and fled to Saudi Arabia for some consulting gig. I haven't heard from him since." Still smiling faintly, she extended her book for me to sign. For a moment, I struggled for words. Then I wrote, "To Lena, no fair-weather friend. May these pages bring you the peace they brought me." I rose from my chair, walked around the table, and hugged her briefly before watching her slip quietly out of the store. By the time the event was nearing its end, the line still stretched across the floor. Glancing up, I froze. Marissa was standing near a display shelf, watching silently. She didn't speak, didn't approach. Her expression was guarded, almost unreadable. I signed the next book, looked up again, and she was gone. Heart pounding, I rose quickly and scanned the room, but she had already vanished. The last person in line turned out to be Flora. We hugged warmly and talked as she walked me out to her car. She offered me a ride back to my hotel, not a Holiday Inn, despite what people like to joke, and we sat together in the car afterward, talking for a long time about Alicia. Flora spoke kindly of her, then asked what I thought. I admitted softly that I thought I might be falling in love. Flora wrapped her arms around me and cried into my shoulder. Headlights cut across the parking lot, flashing red and blue. A police cruiser rolled to a stop beside us, and a uniformed officer stepped out. It was Sergeant Gavin. He tapped on the window, and within moments we were laughing and catching up, as if no time had passed. The impromptu reunion turned into hugs, shared stories, and a quick recounting of my book tour. He hadn't read it yet, so I grabbed an extra copy from the back seat and scrawled on the cover, "Gavin, meeting you changed my life. No offense, someone had to do it." I handed it to him with a grin. After Gavin drove off to return to work, Flora took me back to the house where we shared dinner. Coming back to the place where everything had begun turned out to be far less painful than I had feared. The next chapter began with a shock. Marissa was standing on my doorstep. Alicia and I had just finished breakfast, chatting casually about the latest New York Times bestseller list and marveling at how Friends in the Weather had climbed to number 3 in nonfiction. That conversation evaporated the instant I saw my daughter. "Hi, Daddy. How are you?" Marissa's voice held a trace of awkwardness. "Hi, Marissa," I answered carefully. "I'm doing all right. What brings you here?" "I was in the neighborhood," she said softly. "Thought I'd stop by." I raised an eyebrow. 900 miles out of your way counts as in the neighborhood?" Behind me, Alicia appeared in the doorway, resting a hand gently on my shoulder. "Aren't you going to introduce us, Matthew?" she asked warmly. "Marissa, this is Alicia," I said. Before I could add another word, Alicia stepped forward and wrapped Marissa in an embrace as though they had known each other forever. "Come inside," she said brightly. "I've heard so much about you." Together, the two of them walked into the living room, laughing softly as they went, leaving me rooted at the door, stunned and momentarily forgotten. They gathered around the dining table, their conversation unbroken for nearly an hour. Laughter and stories spilled easily between them while I busied myself in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, wiping counters, and tending to those endless household chores that seem invisible until they're left undone. Every so often I'd pass through the living room on my way to fetch something, catching glimpses of their animated faces, hearing warm voices mingling together in harmony. Marissa showed photo after photo on her phone, Alicia leaning close, gasping and cooing at each snapshot of Marissa's children. "Sweetheart, come sit with us," Alicia eventually called out. Her tone carried a quiet insistence, gentle, yet impossible to ignore. I already knew what she meant. It was time. Time to stop hiding behind chores and face the moment I'd been postponing. I dried my hands slowly, almost as if that would delay the inevitable, and walked into the living room. Alicia patted the seat next to her, and I lowered myself beside her with reluctant caution. Her hand found mine, not in softness, but to anchor me, keep me from retreating. Across the table, Marissa's eyes flicked toward our joined fingers, and the air thickened with unspoken tension. For a long, unbearable moment, none of us spoke. Then Alicia broke the silence, her voice sharp and steady. "All right. Since neither of you is willing to start, I will. Matthew, I invited Marissa here today because she has something to tell you. I knew you wouldn't call her yourself, so I did it. And let me be clear, I might just be a guest in this house, but if you want me to stay, you're going to sit here and listen." Her words left no room for escape. I looked between the two women, searching for an exit that didn't exist. In the end, I stayed rooted in my chair, bracing myself for what was coming. "Dad," Marissa began, her voice soft and hesitant, "I came here because I wanted to know how you've been." "That's true. But more than that." She paused, eyes glistening. "I came here to apologize." The words hung in the room like fragile glass. She took a breath, her hands trembling in her lap. "I spent years blaming you. I convinced myself everything bad that happened, to Mom, to Simon, to me, was because of you. I only ever looked at it through my own hurt. I never thought about what you were feeling." She swallowed hard and continued. "Then I read your book. For the first time I saw things through your eyes. It made me feel foolish, like I'd been blind to half the story. You never showed your feelings when I was growing up, so I thought you didn't have any. But reading those pages, I finally saw you. Really saw you." Her voice cracked as she pressed on. "No matter how old I get, no matter that I'm married now, have kids of my own, I'll always be your little girl. I used to believe Mom could do no wrong, even after everything she did to you. I thought you were unbreakable. But now I understand. That calm, confident face you wore, it was armor. And when she shattered it, I didn't realize how deeply you were wounded." She wiped at her eyes but didn't stop. "If you'd forgiven her and come home, maybe life would have been different. But now I get it. Your strength wasn't in staying, it was in leaving. You walked away from the woman you loved for 25 years because protecting us mattered more. And instead of thanking you for that, I turned my back on you. I blamed you for everything, even Mom's death." Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. "I was wrong, Dad. I see that now. I've started trying to fix what I broke. I've been sharing your book with people, Mom's old friends, yours too. I tell them they never knew the full story, that they owe you an apology just as much as I do." She drew in a shaky breath. "I saw you at that book launch a few weeks ago. I wanted to hug you so badly, but I couldn't. I didn't have the courage. So I'm here now, asking for another chance. It's been 5 years. You have 2 grandchildren you've never met. Please, come back into my life. Be my dad again. I love you. And I need you to love me too." When the last words left her, Marissa lowered her head into her arms and sobbed. Guilt stung me sharp as a needle. I turned toward Alicia and found her already watching me, her eyes urging me to speak. But I couldn't, not yet. My mind was too crowded, my heart too raw. I needed time to think. So I bought myself a few seconds. "What about Simon?" I asked quietly. "Where does he stand on all this? Does he even know you're here?" Marissa let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Simon? He's still lost. Mom's betrayal wrecked him worse than any of us. After Lori caught him cheating and divorced him, he ran off to California. Ever since, it's been one messy relationship after another, even an affair with a married woman whose husband nearly came after him. He's convinced now that everyone cheats, and he doesn't think it's wrong. No, he doesn't know I'm here. And honestly, I don't care what he thinks." Her anger gave me a moment to gather myself. "So, what about you?" I asked. "Are you staying here long? Do you have a place to stay?" "I'm with Flora," she replied. "She wanted me to see her new apartment. I'll be there a couple days before heading back home." I nodded slowly, the weight of everything pressing on me. "All right, here's what I can give you. I'll think about what you said. I can't give you an answer right now, but I promise. I'll think about it." Her face softened with relief. "Honestly, Dad, that's more than I hoped for. Thank you." She stood, dabbing at her wet cheeks. "I should go see Flora, Alicia. It was so nice meeting you. I hope we meet again soon. Take care of my dad, okay?" And then she was gone. The silence she left behind was heavy, but not unbearable. Thoughts tumbled through my mind in chaotic fragments. Regrets, hopes, questions I didn't know how to answer. But for the first time in years, I wasn't alone in facing them. Alicia was beside me. I couldn't imagine my life without her anymore. Only when the house was quiet did I let my tears fall. I didn't want her to see, but I couldn't hold them back any longer. Next chapter. When Alicia and I returned from our Caribbean cruise, we flew straight to Maryland. The trip had been a gift from Prentice Press, celebrating the success of my book, Friends in the Weather, now #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Back in Maryland, I finally met my 2 grandchildren, now ages 2 and 4, and walked Alicia through the town that had once been my entire world. The house, worn with age yet rich with memories, seemed to breathe with the weight of all that had happened within its walls. In its quiet corners, Marissa and I began shaping new memories, not as strangers, but as father and daughter learning to recognize each other anew. Alicia, who had already settled into the role of grandmother with quiet grace, gently stepped in whenever I faltered during those tender moments of rebuilding trust. But the memory I hold closest arrived unexpectedly, one evening at Marissa's dinner table. Surrounded by her family, I told her the news. Alicia and I had chosen to marry. That decision had been born on our cruise, a quiet promise we made to one another, and it felt only right that Marissa should hear it directly from us. This next chapter of our lives demanded such closeness. Flora, ever the planner, immediately began sketching out ideas for the wedding, her mind already racing ahead. Not long after, we prepared to visit Alicia's children to share the same joyful revelation. The happiness between us felt almost unreal at times, as if neither of us could quite believe how life had surprised us. Looking back, we often spoke of the unpredictability of it all, how in our youth we believed love came only once, permanent and unshakable. We thought ourselves invincible back then, certain our first great love would carry us through forever. But life rarely follows such simple paths. It writes itself instead in chapters shaped by time, by loss, and by unexpected gifts of grace. I was blessed with 25 beautiful years beside Claire. Now, I hope for 25 more, or more still, if fate is kind, with Alicia. Perhaps there is another story to be written here, another journey waiting to unfold. "Grow old with me," Browning once wrote. "The best is yet to be." I believe that now more than ever. This love, this final love, feels as though the first one prepared me for it, taught me how to treasure it fully. Time, after all, is not ours to command. Its design rests only in His hands, unseen and complete. In youth, we glimpse only scattered fragments. It is faith alone that reveals the whole picture. And so do not be afraid. Truly, Browning understood.